Hello, Facebook. Okay, I'm live on Facebook and I'm recording on Zoom. And I've got Audacity going for the Superpower You podcast. And so we're going to have a massive experiment here. Hi, Jackie. Okay, I'm not sure how this is going to work, trying to speak to 3 different platforms at the same time. So it'll be fun. Let's see how this goes. Probably won't be responding too much to, oh, actually I could respond to Facebook. So if you have questions, I'll do my best to respond. So here we go. I'm Lisa Betts-Lacroix, and this is a massive experiment in that I am doing a 3-in-1 recording. I'm live on Facebook. I'm in Zoom for my Learning at Home YouTube series, and I'm recording to my voice for my Superpower You podcast all at once. So wish me luck, and here we go. Because I'm on so many platforms at once, here's a brief intro. I am host of the Superpower You podcast, and I'm an actor in my past life, a dancer, I'm a speaker, and a speaking coach. And my primary overarching commitment is to help amazing people find their passion, tell their stories, and to amplify their voices in all the ways so we can change cultural narratives on aging, on learning, on all aspects of life design and personal agency. And my top level belief is that the more we focus on our own and on each other's strengths and gifts, the more positive impact we can have and the better life we can create for ourselves and for each other. So the context for right now, wow, we are in such an incredible state of transformation, of uncertainty, of fear, and possibility. And because when things are uncertain in our lives, because we are human, because we're delicate human beings, when we face uncertainty and adversity, it's my belief that we have the option, we have the possibility to rise up, that we're being called to something greater. And we may not be able to change the circumstances of our existence in the moment and in the day, but we do get to choose how we respond to them. And part of being human is that one part of our brain, the amygdala, I think it is, has us responding in ways that are like a fight or flight response that says run, go, do something now. When we're in the midst of uncertainty, it seems like that's the most obvious thing to do, which is completely natural because our human existence has depended on our ability to respond in that way. It's part of the function of evolution, part of our response to evolution. And so that is one option, but we also have the possibility in times of adversity to respond differently, to rise up, to create new things, to see the silver lining, and to look more deeply at what we're passionate about, what we are committed to, and the world that we want to see evolve. And I am seeing both responses happen in equal measure in my communities, in social media, online, in myself, in my friends, sometimes on a moment-to-moment basis, because again, this is part of our natural experience as delicate human beings. But in my own personal attempt to focus on what I can do to make a difference, to focus on possibilities to create new content, to connect with other people remotely in new ways, since now we are physically distanced from each other, there's a greater need to find alternative ways to connect meaningfully, emotionally, authentically, and to support communities who are needing support in all the ways. Some of it's going to be financial. And in the case and the topic of what I want to jump into today, it has to do with support for communities of people who are now finding themselves with their kids at home. So for now, I'm putting all of my launch efforts, all of my focus that have been forefront for me in the past month or so, with regards to my offerings for life legacies, for artful aging, changing that narrative, and for content around speak up for yourself. I'm putting all of those to the side for now because I realized that there is a need for expertise that I have in progressive education. And I know that the experience and the knowledge that I have can be useful to specifically to parents who are suddenly finding themselves at home with their kids, unexpectedly thrust into some version of learning at home. Whether we want to call it homeschooling or temporary homeschooling or supporting virtual learning, it doesn't really matter. The point is there are many people who are impacted by school closures, certainly in the area I live in, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, but elsewhere too. And so for the past 3 days, I've been hosting conversations. I've been participating in other people's conversations. I've been taking part in panel discussions and compiling resources. And essentially, when it comes right down to it, issuing reassurance for families who are now finding themselves with their kids at home, who are going to be needing to work from home while they are trying to support their kids, and who are not really sure exactly how to approach this completely unknown world. And so I've been gathering all of this information. I've been hosting these conversations in a Facebook group, which you can find by searching Learning at Home in Crisis. I'll also put links in the show notes for the podcast and in the notes on YouTube. The history for this, I'll share a little bit because most of the work that I've done in progressive education will be pretty much unknown to followers that I have now because I've essentially not been focusing on it for a while. But the story goes that about a decade ago, after hearing a talk by David Wiley, who is a professor at Brigham Young University, about the need for colleges to change or die, he basically said, right, and this is in around 2008, he said, if colleges don't change right now, they're going to die. They need to adapt to the changing circumstances. And when I saw that talk, my brain went ping, this is so true, because it affirmed what I already knew to be true. And that is that learning not only can happen outside of brick and mortar institutionalized education, but that sometimes it happens more effectively. And I knew that because I, along with my friend Jennifer Dees, was the co-founder of a network of San Francisco Bay Area families who independently educate their kids outside of traditional school. We started that group in 2008, expecting a few of our friends to join. And before we knew it, we had close to 100 families in the group. It has since vacillated between 350 and 450 families of people in the Bay Area who are independently educating their kids for academic and intellectual reasons. And what we've seen as that group has grown and as that group has been a leader in how to collectively, as a community, create environments for learning that were an alternative to inside a brick and mortar school, what we've learned is that there's so much possibility, and I could not understand why what we knew to be true wasn't spreading more widely through the higher education system and into life in general. And so I went on a mission to make this known. I organized free learning dinners. We called them the free learning dinner salons with Dale Stevens, who is the founder of Uncollege and in the first class of the Teal Fellowship. And we brought together a diverse group of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and angel investors and innovative educators and startup entrepreneurs. And we got together to speak about what was possible. And some of the early participants in those conversations were people like Michael Staten of Learn Capital, who has been investing in educational startups that want to change the way education is done for the past decade, as well as creating offerings like a Co-Learn Club, which he's still working on and which is evolving. It included people like Ben Nelson, who shared at the time about Minerva University, which I featured on my podcast, and I'll link to the show notes to my conversation with one of the Minerva students, because that school is now a reality. But in our free learning dinner salons, it was an idea Ben Nelson had. So many of us were getting together, seeing the possibility for life being for life offering so many opportunities and so many options for learning outside of traditional brick and mortar school, and seeing the possibility of that expanding into so many different ways. So we got together and we had these conversations during that period of time as the free learning dinner salons. In 2016, along with a friend, Marcy Delgato, we created the Innovative Education 2016 Education Conference, which tried to bring schools together with innovative educators and homeschoolers to talk about what was possible. And it drew a lot of people, and it was a really amazing, exciting conference. I've been featured and interviewed by Wired Magazine and on CBS News and various other news outlets to talk about all the possibilities that I saw coming in terms of the independent learning movement that was growing out of our space here in Silicon Valley. But the reality is, I was shocked that this change wasn't happening more quickly. And so I began to focus my attention elsewhere. I started my podcast and started to focus on rewriting the stories about aging and supporting people in other ways, and figuring that, people were wanting to stay in schools. That's the way it was going to be. And the people that were homeschooling, and people in my community, there's a good team of 7 people running that organization in the most effective of ways. And so I moved on. Now, what's happened in the last few days has been really incredible, because so many people, I don't know how many, I didn't research the number, but all of the parents in the Bay Area, at least, and beyond, are suddenly finding themselves with their kids at home. And what's happening is that we're all coming back together again to have these conversations about what we know and what we've learned, so that we can be a comfort, so that we can provide resources, so that we can let people who are having their kids at home for the first time know that it's okay, they're going to be all right. And so in the past few days, this unprecedented time where we are under shelter in place rules, which means we can't go out of the house in any way that really connects us with other people. So we collectively are operating in a different way than we normally do. Yet I believe that we have experience and insight that can be useful to people who are in the same situation now. So in the past few days, I've hosted conversations with people in my community, with people like Jackie Rigoni and Jamie Heston and Marla Schmauder. I've had conversations with Daniel Strachman and Michael Staten and Pavi Erickson and other parents and people who've had experience learning outside of brick and mortar institutions. And what I've been struck by is how, when I reflect back on each conversation, how many top level points have been repeated over and over in all of the conversations. So I thought it would be a really good time for me to share the top level tips with you, some of the things that keep coming up over and over again, the repeating themes that have been arising in these conversations and in these interviews, because I think that there's the possibility that this information could be useful at the very top level. So before I go further, I want to first acknowledge the sponsor of this series, the YouTube series. I want to acknowledge the sponsor of my Superpower You podcast, the learning series, and that is Outschool. Outschool is an online community marketplace of classes for kids that meet over a remote interactive learning classroom platform where independent teachers create their own content, and they have over 10,000 classes offered in a very wide range of topics, from traditional subjects to coding, technology, art, music, and languages, as well as a wide range of life skills and also more esoteric topics. The classes range in price, but they're usually in the $12 per hour range, and users can search by age, by subject, by course format, and by time frame. So if you have content you're passionate about and you'd love to offer that, or if you have learners whose love of learning could be enhanced by a broad range of online classes, you can join more than 30,000 families at outschool.com. And now, because the times are what they are, I want to give an extra nod to Outschool right now. As we see mass closures of public schools across the United States, Outschool is making $100,000 worth of classes available for free to affected families. And they're noting that there are a lot of families who are impacted from all levels of financial need. And so they're asking that families use this funding only if needed, or to select just a few classes that you're interested in and consider paying for the rest. There's also the option to donate to this special effort if you're in a position to do so, and to please remember that when you pay full price for Outschool classes, it helps to keep the teachers funded. So I'll link to Outschool's announcement on this topic as well as their class offerings in the show notes. If you're a parent who is concerned about how to approach this time period, whether it's 3 weeks or 5 months, or if you know someone who is feeling concerned about how to approach having kids at home, virtually learning or homeschooling, then please also point them to my Facebook group, which is called Learning at Home in Crisis. I'll put a link in the show notes, and you can also find it by searching Facebook. So I want to touch on the top level takeaways that have been coming up as we've been having these conversations over the past few days. And the first one that I want to share that is my top level piece is that this is a sanctioned opportunity for you as parents to try out what it's like to have kids at home, to explore the possibilities that so many of us who've been doing it intentionally have known for years, and to see what it feels like. It doesn't mean you have to commit to it long term, but so many of us, when we come to homeschooling, spend weeks or months considering the ramifications, researching the possibilities, and then finally making the tough decision to do it, knowing that we are, with intense feelings, taking on this responsibility for educating our kids. And in a way, you have this beautiful gift that is, you didn't make the choice yourself. You are here through no fault of your own. So the beautiful thing is that you can have that freedom, devoid of the responsibility for having taken it on yourself, and see what it feels like. Now, the caveat to that is, of course, it's not going to feel exactly like what we experience on a day-to-day basis, because you have the limitations of school. You have the expectations the teachers are sending home remotely. You haven't had time to prepare, and many people are also having to work simultaneously and navigate and negotiate their own intense feelings about all the uncertainty that's happening in the world. So that's the caveat. But the overarching piece is there is an opportunity to find the glimmers and the sparks of your own connection with your kids, your own, to remember back to the sparks of love of learning that are, I know, still inside you somewhere, and that maybe have even been waiting for some time to explore. So there's a lot of possibility here. So the second piece that comes up over and over again from the experts and from my friends and from the other people who have experience in this is, it's time for now to put content on hold as much as possible. I recognize that you may have expectations and requirements coming at you from the school, but I have a feeling that teachers too will be aware of and sensitive to the fact that digesting content and presenting content as usual is not something that is going to be very realistic to do right now. So even though it's difficult, even though it requires getting out of our standard cultural mindset on education, I would really implore you to know that you're not going to be effectively recreating school at home, and it's possible to put content on hold as much as you can given other expectations. An overarching overarching point that came up in the call with Daniel Strockman yesterday, and it came from another homeschooling parent, Teresa, and I just love this, is the idea of considering the model, consider adopting the model and the thinking of the parent as consultant rather than the parent as manager. When you're new to having your kids at home, you may think, I've got to be managing them, I've got to be teaching them. And the reality is that if you take on an attitude with your kids that you're there to support their learning or their activity or what they choose to take on for the day, everyone's going to be a lot happier. I could say more about all of these points. I'm going to try to consolidate it and keep it a little bit tighter just for the purposes of time. Curiosity. Curiosity is key here. It's an opportunity to revisit what it means to live with curiosity, what it means to nurture the innate curiosity that kids come with, and to ask them what they're interested in, to ask as many questions as you try to give answers. That's something to just continuously nurture. Just get curious. The one that's come up for me the most prevalent in the most repeatedly, I guess, the one that's come up for me most repeatedly, probably because it's something that is dear to me anyway, is the concept and the possibility of focusing on meta-learning skills and metacognition skills. To remember that learning how to learn is actually the most relevant, the most useful, and the most generalizable skill that you can strengthen in yourself right now and support and facilitate and scaffold in your kids. When they build skills and awareness about their own learning style, about how they learn best, and about learning how to learn, they'll be able to take that knowledge and that skill set back to school whenever they go back, and they'll be able to benefit from it right now as you're spending the time together at home. Now's also the time to put your attention on your values. All of us have a little more time, and we certainly have a limited amount of space. A lot of things have been removed from our time, from our schedules. So we actually have time to take a step back and to consider what we most value, what we prioritize, what's most important to us, what's needed, and how we want to relate with each other and with ourselves in order to bring, good to the world. And even exploring that query with your kids is a great learning topic. It's a great thing to share with your kids, the question of, now that we have this time, how do we want to spend it, and how can we be productive, and how can we be forward thinking with how we design our time together and individually. I like to share regularly with my kids and in general the idea of a balanced consumption, creation, and contribution model. So that means that when my kids are doing things I think they might have done enough of, say, for example, being on the computer, being on the screen, I suggest that they consider how much consuming they've been doing. And consuming is everything from going to the fridge and getting a snack to being online. For adults, it's being on Facebook. It could be reading or doing research, and it could be playing video games. And if there's been a high level of consumption, then I ask myself and my kids, and I'd invite you to do the same, to bring in a balanced model of creation and contribution. So creativity, what can you create? What can you make? Can you design a video game? Can you do some art? Can you make up a song? Can you make a meal? And contribution. So contribution is, if you've been consuming a lot, then where can you find some place to contribute? And that can be contributing to someone in your immediate environment, your family, your mother, your siblings, or your larger world. And contribution and creation are both things that can easily be done from the comfort and from the limitations of your own space. So this is a very adaptable model for the times right now. Next is the idea of expanding your understanding of what an appropriate structure could be and should look like. So I think for new parents, parents new to having their kids at home, there's a sense that they need to recreate the structure of school. And again, I'm going to suggest that you do not need to, nor do you want to try to recreate the structure of school at home. Instead, it's an opportunity for you to sit down with your family members, with your children, with your co-parents or your co-creators in your environment, and say, how do we want to structure this? And every family may be a little different. So for example, today in my conversation with Jackie Rigoni, she described the structure that her family adheres to, which is everybody gets dressed and they show up and they meet for, I can't remember if they have breakfast, but they get together and everyone knows that there are certain tasks that they need to do every day. They need to get outside every day. They have their parameters. And the beautiful thing is that we can all create this in a way that addresses our own values, our strengths, and our circumstances. But the idea that you can design the structure for your day is something I'd invite you to consider, because there's actually no limitation to how you approach this. This is really up for your design, based on how creative you can be, and measuring and communicating with each other about the needs of the family, which actually leads to one of the other things that has come up over and over again, and that is collaborate with your kids. This does not have to be, and in fact, in my opinion, it's better not, like all things, done top-down authoritarian. This is an opportunity to co-create a period of at-home learning time, whether it's 3 weeks or 5 months, and that's adaptable on a day-to-day basis with your kids. So whenever something isn't working, it's an opportunity to come back together to say, what do we want to keep? What do we want to change? And what do we want to throw out altogether? And so in all things, as you're designing your day and as you're going through the process, check back in with your kids. Your kids are a central part of your team. Another thing that I've noticed coming up over and over again, and that I'm also extremely excited about sharing here, is the fact that you can, as an adult, take the skills, the tools, and the understanding and experience that you've developed over the course of your adult life in the adult world, in your working world, on your teams, in your business if you're an entrepreneur, and bring those back to your children. Work with your children to share how they might apply the skills that you have used in your adult life, in your work life, to their own end, to meet and to support the goals and the projects that they want to take on right now. So teach them the productivity tools and work with them on the communication skills that you've learned. Bring any content expertise you have to the table as an offering, and draw on your kids' knowledge, because it's very possible your kids may be able to teach you something that you can use in your work, in your own learning, or in your personal life. And it may be that you just have not actually had the time to sit down with them to learn from them. This is another meta learning piece, is that being a learner is being a teacher, and being a teacher is a learner. This is the opportunity to dissolve and soften some of the distinctions, some of the lines between our experience as human beings. So this is a little bit of a segue into another topic, but this is our opportunity to dissolve those lines between learner and teacher, to dissolve the lines between work and family, to dissolve the lines between structure and no structure. And I am so excited about that, because I am of the belief that so many of those boundaries, so many of those very strongly defined distinctions have limited us in so many ways that have have kept us smaller than we need to be, that have kept us more separate than we need to be. And so by dissolving these boundaries between ages and structures and roles, we're going to have this amazing opportunity to experience what life is like when we have more malleability and more cross-pollination between the different roles and the different stages and the different places that we all live and learn in. We have the opportunity, perhaps for the first time, to have all ages together, to have cross-pollination and interaction between generations in ways that is not part of our typical day-to-day life when we're going off to offices and to schoolrooms. So it's the most beautiful possibility of exploring what life can be like when we blend work and learning and home and family, and when we customize it based on our own individual needs through the process of collaborating together, communicating, and pivoting as needed. So I hope what I'm communicating to you is all of the possibility that is here for you to explore and to investigate, to experience as you're going into a new period of time, whether that time ends up being 3 weeks or 5 months. One thing I know for sure is we're going to see radical change happen. And many of us in this alternative learning space have been experiencing the options, the opportunities available to us in this way for years. And don't get me wrong, we also are in the process of having to adapt right now, because as so many of us say, the idea that you're experiencing homeschooling is actually as inaccurate as that word is always a misnomer. Because most of us who are homeschoolers or independent learners or a la carte learners or all the different terms we use, we're not home all that often, and we don't often try to recreate school. We're out in the communities, we're gathering together, we're using museums, we're doing all of the things that are available to us out in the world, and those are no longer, or not for now, so available to us. So we're having to adapt as much as you are. But the message that I want to share with you is that what we know from our own lived experience is that the options available to you and the freedom that you have the opportunity to experience, the connection and the relationships that are available for deepening here, and the experience and practice of collaboration together as a team is potentially life-changing, both in terms of the kind of relationships that you're able to deepen right now, but also because of the skills and the deeper understandings and the tools that you can practice now and take out back into the world when everything returns to life as normal to the degree to which it does. So, let's see, is there anything else? I think that might be it. I do want to say thank you so much to all the people who have been jumping on to conversations with me, who've been willing to share their expertise, who've been willing to be encouraging to people who are finding themselves uncertain about this micro aspect of our larger uncertainty. And for people who are willing to show up and to connect and to contribute to other people. I believe this is one of the greatest opportunities we have in front of us, and that is to manage our mind and to point our focus and our attention onto the query of how can we make a difference and how can we create new offerings to strengthen our businesses, but also to support and contribute to the people around us who either need support financially or who need encouragement and ideas so that they can also stay focused on the possibilities that are available to us right now and the silver lining that's inherent in all times of crisis and change. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I want to thank you so much for being with me here on Facebook. I want to thank you so much for being with me here on YouTube. And thank you so much for being with me on the Superpower You podcast, as always. For now and until next week, until the next live, I send you big love.